My heart is beating a mile a minute as I approach the bathroom door. Just a few minutes ago, I heard the door open, its creaky hinges sounding an eerie notification. The only problem is, I am the only one here. As I make my way up the spiral staircase, I can hear myself breathing, each creaking step squeaking underneath my feet, the candlelight flickering in the darkness, illuminating my destination by only a few inches in front of me. I finally make it to the door, and I see that it is indeed closed. With my heart pounding, what did I hear? Earlier, if it wasn't the door. So many questions running through my brain as my breathing intensifies. Instead of opening it, I decide to look through the keyhole. Not a brilliant move since it's dark in there, but to be fair, I'm not exactly thinking clearly at this precise moment. I put the candle up to the hole to try and give myself some light. My eyes adjust to the light as I focus. All I see is a dark, quiet room. No sound, no movement. My breathing begins to return to normal, and that's when the eyes look back out at me through the keyhole. I jump back in fright, falling on my ass, almost dropping the candle onto the old floor. I scooted across the floor and sat my back up against the wall, eyes wide, mouth open. Did I just see that? Who's in my house? Anger started to boil through me. This intruder is not welcome here. I did not invite anyone in. I stood up and went to the door, quickly opening it and bursting inside to confront the intruder. As I moved the candle around the room, I didn't see anyone in the big, empty space. "Hello?" I questioned out with no answer in return. I walked over to the window to look behind the drapes. Nobody there. Closet is next. Still nobody there. Was I imagining it? Am I going mad, alone in this big house? "I saw you in here," I spoke out again. Again. There was no reply. Convinced that there was nobody in the room, I walked out and closed the door behind me. It creaked as the old hinges moved. I walked down the hall and down the stairs to my study where I was before I heard the noise. I sat down at my desk and finished the letter I was writing to my wife. "My dearest Emily, soon we will be together again. This house is almost completed. The renovations took a little longer than expected. There was much to do. The roof was in dire shape from being vacant for so long. The servants' quarters were badly damaged and in need of a complete redo. And 2 of the 4 washrooms needed a complete overhaul. Tomorrow the electricity will be installed, which will be a welcome addition to the dark house. The study, which is where I am writing this letter to you, is now finished. As the fireplace warms the room, I am filled with warm thoughts knowing that we will be together again soon. I hope all is well with you back home. Say hello to your parents for me. Yours truly, your loving husband." As I put the pen down and I sealed the envelope, I couldn't help but get the feeling I was being watched. I sat there quietly in the room for a moment. Nothing but the sound of the crackling fire filled the room. Sleep will not come easily tonight. I was right in thinking that sleep wasn't going to come easy. All through the night I kept hearing weird noises throughout the house. I kept thinking in the back of my mind that the strange intruder was still inside, walking around, trying to steal from me, or worse, murder me in my sleep. The worst feeling, however, was the feeling that I was being watched. There wasn't much illumination in my bedroom either, just the light from the fireplace that eventually dimmed and burned itself out sometime in the early morning. The following morning, an electrical company was arriving. At least I would have more light to help me see and give me some peace of mind. There was still a lot of work to do in the house, and now I'll be able to continue some of my renovations after the sun goes down. The electrical company finally did arrive. 2 men, having already been at the house before to map everything out and already install the lights, went straight to work. In a few hours I had electricity. What a beautiful sight seeing my new mansion lit inside, the walls adorning with elegance and beauty, and the big spiral staircase shone with the wooden fixtures installed, the chandelier shining above my head in the foyer. I smiled to myself. A sense of accomplishment came over me. Finally, something to show my new bride. Finally, a home that we will soon share. "That's it, Mr. H," the one electrician said as he walked up to me. "It's a beautiful sight," I replied back, still admiring the beauty. "It sure is," he said back, huffing and puffing like he had just ran a marathon. He handed me the work order form, which I signed and handed back to him. "You okay? You look a little flush," I asked him. "Just in a hurry to get out of this place," he said, taking the form from my hand. "I admire you for taking over this house, but personally I think you're crazy." "In what way?" I inquired back. The second electrician quickly moved past us, almost running outside. We followed him out to the cool autumn air. By the time we made it outside, he was already in the company truck, eyes wide with fear, looking up into the second-story windows. "You really don't know the history of this place? The reason why it stayed empty for so long?" He gave me a puzzled look. I looked back at him with an inquisitive look. "I'm afraid not. I had just relocated here a short time ago. I just recently got married, and while searching for a house, I came across this place. The location is perfect, and so is the price." I'm not surprised," he said rather coldly. There was a honk from the company truck. "What is that supposed to mean?" I inquired abruptly, startled by the horn. "Mr. and Mrs. Glenmore, the occupants that lived here before." He began telling me the story as he loaded the van. His co-worker sat in the passenger seat impatiently waiting. "They had a small child, a little girl named Emma. She was a cute little thing, apparently no more than 3 years old when she got sick. She got the pox. Anyway, the dock was too far away, and the weather was bad that night. Emma's temperature spiked well into the hundreds, so I was told. Mrs. Glenmore was desperate to try and get her temperature down, so she drew a cold bath and put Emma in." He closed the back of the company truck and looked out the house and back at me. "The water was too cold for the little Emma, and it sent her body into shock. Eventually, she lost consciousness and eventually died in Mr. Glenmore's arms. Sometime later, Mr. Glenmore actually died of consumption, leaving Mrs. Glenmore a grieving widow. Apparently, she would hold seances to try and talk to her dead child and husband. They said she went mad in this big house all by herself, and eventually she jumped off the roof and broke her neck." "That's quite the story." I looked back at the house. The servants told the story quite vividly. The electrician jumped in the driver's seat of the van. "They told all kinds of stories about hauntings and such. Sometimes they said you can even hear little Emma crying." He started the van. "Eventually the servants left in fright. There's been a couple attempts to sell the place, but each time the new owners would put the place back up for sale." He started to drive off and stopped suddenly and looked back at me. "Something else you should know, Mr. H. They are buried somewhere behind the house." The van sped off down the driveway after that chilling revelation. I stood for a moment and watched them speed off out of sight. Then I turned and walked into the house. I will have to look for the gravesite behind the house, but first I have some more renovations to finish. That evening I put on my overcoat and stepped into the foggy, cool air and walked around the back of the property to look for the gravesites of the original owners. As I walked, the owls would sound their nightly calls, and a wolf sounded in the distance. The breeze blew through the trees, adding to the eerie scene before me. I finally walked up to the 3 tombstones. Emma Glenmore, 1918 and 1911, Our Little Angel. The second one said Henry Glenmore, 1876 to 1921, husband and father. Grace Gilmore was the third one that I looked at, 1881 to 1921, with Emma, it read. As I stood there looking at the gravestones, the words of the electrician went through my mind. They were a young couple struck by tragedy. May they find peace. Suddenly the wind picked up, and I could have sworn I heard someone whisper, "Leave this place." It didn't have to ask me twice. The cool air was chilling my bones, and I needed to sit by the fire. It was a comforting feeling walking back up to the house, seeing the lights on inside. I put my overcoat on the rack stand and made my way to the kitchen to make some hot tea to warm my chilled bones. I entered the kitchen, then stopped in my tracks. All the cupboard doors were open. Curious, as I know I didn't open them. Once again, I was convinced that there was an intruder in the house. This time I went to my gun cabinet and pulled out my Winchester Model 94 rifle. I checked to see if it was loaded and went in search of my unwanted intruder. I made my way slowly up the creaking stairs. Suddenly, all the doors slammed shut, causing an echoing racket. I froze in my spot, gripping the Winchester tight, my heart pounding in my chest. "He'll hurt Emma," a female's voice cried out. The Winchester was yanked out of my hand. I stood in disbelief as it fell onto the steps. Then, with a strong force, I was pushed down the stairs. I fell backwards down 10 steps, landing hard on my back. In considerable pain, I laid on the floor for a few minutes. I looked up and saw my Winchester still on the steps. Then everything went black. As I awoken with the sound of a little girl crying upstairs, I picked myself up off the floor, still in a considerable amount of pain. I held onto the stairs banister as I made my way up the stairs once again. The Winchester was missing from the spot it had laid. There was more crying, this time with the sound of running water. I made it to the top of the stairs and walked to the bathroom. The crying got louder the closer I got. I flicked on the bathroom light and looked inside, then the crying stopped. The room was empty. Feeling sore and lightheaded, I decided to go lay down. The next morning I woke up to the sunrise and birds chirping. My back pinched as I sat up in bed. I made my way downstairs to make coffee. Still no Winchester on the steps, and all the cupboards were closed. With my coffee in hand, I made my way to the gun cabinet and found my Winchester in the exact spot I took it from the night before. Was I imagining everything last night? My mind playing tricks on me after the conversation with the electrician? My back, maybe it was too sore from all the renovations that I've been working on. I set out to work more around the house. As I hammered the new trim in the upstairs bathroom, in the corner of my eye I saw someone standing off to my right. I quickly looked, and there she was, a little girl dressed in a white flowing dress. I jumped as she startled me. She stood there watching. Then suddenly something fell outside. The shadow quickly went past the window, and it landed with a thud outside. I quickly went to the window to look outside, but there was nothing there. I turned to look at the girl, and she was also gone. I gave my head a shake, double-checked the ground outside the window, and went back to work. I worked slowly that day, as my body was still in a lot of pain, but I did manage to get a lot accomplished. That night I relaxed in a hot bath. I laid in the hot water relaxing when I heard a little girl laughing. I opened my eyes and looked around the room. I was alone, of course. I sat there listening, and aside from the usual creaks and ticking of the clock, I heard nothing. Sometime later, I was in bed sleeping when I was awoken again by a scream coming from somewhere in the house, and that's when everything started to go crazy. I looked at the clock and it showed 3:05 in the morning. I ran out of my bedroom to see where the scream came from.
"She's not breathing!"
A whispering scream filled the air. It was coming from the bathroom again. I ran to the room. Just as I was about to enter the room, the door slammed shut with a powerful force in front of me, almost hitting me in the face. I tried to open the door, but it was locked somehow.
"You are not welcome here,"
a male's voice echoed around me. "The hell I'm not. This is my house," I replied sternly as I kept trying frantically to open the door.
"This is not your house. Get out!"
The male's voice echoed louder around me. The female crying and wailing continued from the other side of the door. I gave up trying to get into the door and began to walk down the hallway towards the stairs to fetch something to open the door. Suddenly, I was pushed from behind forcefully, and I went flying down the stairs, landing on my side with a loud crash. I turned back and to look at the stairs, and I saw this tall, ghostly shape lumbering towards me. He was wearing a black suit and tie. His eyes were pitch black. It lumbered and floated towards me down the stairs in a menacing way.
"I told you this is our house, and you are not welcome here."
It spoke with no facial movements. I tried to get up and stumbled.
"I don't want you here to hurt our Emma."
He reached out for me. I managed to get on my feet and stumbled towards the door. It opened before I even got to it. The wind picked up from behind me, an ice-cold breeze surrounding me as he came closer. I made it outside into the cold October night. Falling onto the ground, the door slammed shut behind me. I sat up on the ground and looked at the house. It was pitch black and cold feeling. There were no signs of movement. No crying, no wailing of any kind. It was as if the house was abandoned again. I stood up and began to walk towards the front door, but an eerie feeling came over me, so I backed away. I got into my vehicle and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I saw the three of them standing at the bedroom window watching me drive away.